Morning, everybody. I wanted to go ahead and start it so we can make sure everybody can hear me. If you can hear me, give me a thumbs up. If you cannot hear me, the easiest way is to log off, log back in. That's the easiest way because usually it's a slight technical issue, but I'm getting lots of thumbs up. All right. So my name is Kara Poli, and I will be presenting this morning. I have with me lots of other folks from the department as resources for this topic. I've got Amy Hammond. She's going to be watching our questions box and putting some resources in the chat as well. And then Enrique Trejo is also here with us from Physical Inspections. I have got Jeremy Strimler and Nathan Darris with us from the Housing Resource Center. Manuel Pena is also with us from Physical Inspections. And then Christina Thompson and Shay Erickson are with us, and they specialize in some of our PFC stuff. And then Dawn Brewer is on the team that handles a lot of our complaints that come in to the Multifamily Compliance Group, and she is with us today. So we've got lots of good resources to talk about the complaint process and kind of, you know, how it works from the tenant standpoint all the way through to when we get it, and then, you know, to kind of how you guys get it. And you can ask questions. You can, this is an open conversation. We will present this until about 10:25, 10:30, kind of depending on how many questions you guys have and how much interaction you guys have. And then we will switch to our open forum where you can ask any of your burning compliance questions. So without further ado, I think I introduced everybody. Yes. All right. So this topic for this month is the complaint process. Welcome back. I know we did not have office hours over the summer, but we are back and we are going to do them each month for the next few months for sure. We've got some exciting things coming in 2026, so stay tuned for sure. So as always, we've got our mailing address and our physical address there. If you need to contact us, those are the two addresses, kind of depending on what your need is. Our website is listed there, which Amy also put in the chat. If you need to send a general email to the department, or if your tenants ask for an email to the department, you can give them that one. If you're not sure what specifically they need, the info folks can forward that out to the different divisions and get it to somebody who can help with more, you know, knowledge details, kind of depending on what the tenant's need is or what your need is. The division phone number for multifamily compliance is that 8869 number. And then there is also a toll-free number there that if you needed to call the department, you could call that, or if you wanted to give that to your tenants as well, you could give that. Or if you're a tenant on the call with us today, you could use that. So this webinar will run from about 9 to 10:30, and then we'll have the open forum. We'll take a little bit of a break to swap PowerPoints and kind of shift gears. And then we will do open forum until 11:30. And staff will remain present to help answer any questions throughout this portion of the webinar, as well as throughout the open forum. The open forum is not recorded, but this webinar is recorded and will be posted to our website usually within about a week. You will not receive a certificate for this mini webinar, but you will get an email that says thank you for joining us. And that sometimes goes to folks' junk or spam folders. So you may want to keep an eye on that in the next couple of days. 24 hours-ish is usually when those go out. So if you don't get that, unfortunately, I am not able to reissue those, so you will want to keep an eye on that. I would encourage you to silence your phones, put an out of office, be fully present with us during this so that you can get the most out of it. We want to be sure that everybody, you know, is able to benefit from this and able to learn what they came to learn and ask the questions they came to ask. If you'll put any of your questions in the questions box. Oh. I'm not sure who caller 2 is, but so if you are caller 2, I did just turn your mic off because I was given some feedback. But so if you'll put any of your questions in the questions box, Amy will let us ask those out loud. so that the whole group can benefit from any of the questions asked, if that would be if the group would benefit. Some resources, I always like to share these with you guys. I won't go through them in super detail, but we've got our main compliance page, manuals and rules, compliance forms, reports, utility allowance information, rent limits, training, frequently asked questions, and then a division staff link. If you need pretty much anything with the department, you can always go to the main TDHCA page and put in the search what you're looking for. And usually you can find it pretty easily. The search definitely has worked very well from what I have tested out with it. So in this training, we're going to talk about the complaint process and the rules that go with that. We're going to talk about some common complaints. We're going to talk about some suggestions that might help to avoid future complaints. We will not discuss specific properties or complaints. We will not discuss complaints about programs that are not monitored by the department, and we will not change the outcome of an existing complaint or corrective action required. We will also not give legal advice. So if your complaint deals with something that you would need to get an attorney involved, that will probably be our answer. So the department complaint process can be found online. And if you've got if you have a tenant that says they want to contact us, you can give them that website. It's in the tenant rights and resources guide as well. If they call us and say, hey, I have a concern about my property, we're going to give them that website. So that's all kind of, you know, in an effort to be transparent, that is all right there and shareable. These are good resources for you guys as on-site staff, compliance, ownership, management to have and to know. And this is also good information for you to make available to your tenants. You know, if they are looking to move, that vacancy clearinghouse is a great resource. They can put in the zip code where they're looking to go. Moving is kind of part of life. And as you know, in property management and in, you know, kind of the housing world, that's going to happen. We should not get our feelings hurt about it. We should understand that people move for a variety of reasons, and sometimes they're just generally unhappy, and that needs to happen as well. So that vacancy clearinghouse is available. They can put in their zip code they're looking for. They can put in a couple other different details, and then they can search for different properties in those areas. The vacancy clearinghouse is also a really good resource as long as you guys, as our housing partners, keep your unit status report updated. If it's not updated, then the vacancy clearinghouse doesn't work as well because it doesn't tell us real-time data. So that is one of the reasons that we encourage all owners and property staff to keep that vacancy clearinghouse updated. We also have an income and rent limits section for TDHCA supported properties, and we have a handout that you can provide your tenants. I know for those of you that join us pretty regularly, you have heard Amy and I talk about that handout a lot, and we always encourage you to give that out anytime, and especially at renewal when rents are changing or when utility allowances are changing, because it does help explain kind of the program requirements and what's going on and what causes it. There's some misnomers where folks think that their rent is based on their income, and they don't understand that it's an income limit with a rent determination kind of a thing. And so a lot of times that extra resource is super helpful in addition to the required tenant rights and resources guide. So some definitions before we kind of get into the meat and potatoes of it. A complainant is the person filing a complaint. The complaint is what is submitted to the department in writing, either via mailed letter, fax, email, or submitted online through our website from a person that believes the department has the authority to resolve the issue. The complaint coordinator is the department employee designated by the executive director or their designee to monitor the public complaint system and coordinate activities related to complaints. And that, I think, is what the Housing Resource Center folks do for us. The complaint liaison is going to then be the department employee designated by each division or program to handle each of the division or program's complaint-related issues. The department is the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs. The person is any individual other than an employee of the department and any partnership, corporation, association, governmental subdivision, or public or private organization of any character. Public complaint system is our department created system used to track complaints received by the department. The way it's going to work is the complaint coordinator is going to enter the complaint in the complaint system. The complaint coordinator will review the complaint and then forward the complaint to the appropriate program or division complaint liaison. Then the complaint liaison will research and evaluate the issues identified in the complaint and then resolve to close the complaint, or they will, like for compliance and for physical inspections, those get assigned out. So you may have a different person contacting you about complaints. It won't always be the same person. We do have a complaint team that kind of reviews those to make sure they're in our jurisdiction. Do they need to go to a specific person because of the nature of the complaint? Do they need to have somebody take a look at it for accessible reasons, or is it a physical inspections complaint, or is it a kind of a combination of compliance monitoring and physical inspections? And so there's kind of that's kind of a quick bullet point about a bigger process. So notwithstanding any other provisions of the rule, if the complaints received by the department where there is no method of contacting the complainant, we will close the complaint in the public complaint system and provide a copy of the complaint to the applicable program or division. So we would get a copy of that complaint, but if there's nobody to reach out to, there's nobody to let know, hey, this has been resolved. We might still reach out to the property and say, hey, we got a complaint about this, and let you know if there needs to be corrective action. But if we don't have a tenant's name, sometimes that gets a little bit difficult, and sometimes folks don't want to provide that. A complaint coordinator may also identify if the complaint involves a potential reasonable accommodation request involving the department, recipient, or property. In those cases, the complaint will be handled as outlined in 1.204 relating to reasonable accommodations. Complaints that have potential Fair Housing Act violations may, at the department's discretion, be also referred to the Texas Workforce Commission's Civil Rights Division. The department will notify the complainant of the status of the complaint at least quarterly until there is a disposition, which is the final determination. There is no further process available except as otherwise provided in state or federal law. We do try to get these worked more quickly than quarterly, but sometimes there are corrective action processes and different things involved that require it to kind of sit for a little bit while you guys make corrective action or while the tenant submits different documentation. And so there are times where that might not be a 15-day resolution period, and it might take us, a longer period of time. An information file about each complaint is maintained. The file includes the complaint number, the name of the complainant, the date the complaint was received, the subject matter of the complaint, the name of each person contacted in relation to the complaint, if applicable, the summary of the results and of the review of the complaint, the date the complaint was closed, and an explanation of the final resolution of the complaint, including the reason the file was closed. Anything we want to add before we just jump in?
We got a question that I think is a really good one. They said, if the complaint is determined to not be within TDHCA's jurisdiction, what guidance do you give the complainant? We provide the complainant with the reason why it is not within our jurisdiction. A lot of things do come to us that are not. So for compliance monitoring, and I'll let Enrique talk what you guys do when it comes to physical inspections, but for compliance monitoring, we say this complaint does not fall within the department's jurisdiction because sometimes we get complaints about neighbors or something like that. And we'll say we do not have any state or federal guidance that can assist you with this. You need to call local law enforcement or your management or office or ownership. And we provide the complainant with the owner's name and contact information. That is why it is very important that the owner has contact information in CMTS. We provide them with the management company's contact and phone number and email address. And then we provide them with different resources that may help them. So if it is outside of our jurisdiction and it's something that should go to legal aid, we give them the contacts for legal aid. If it's something that should go to the Civil Rights Division of the Texas Workforce Commission, we give them those contacts. So we have a whole list of resources that we give to every complainant when we are closing out a complaint or when it's not in our jurisdiction. And I don't know if physical inspections, you do anything in addition to that or outside of that.
You hit it, because if the issue is discrimination, we refer to the Texas Workforce Commission. If the issue is a housing voucher, we tell them to contact their voucher provider. And if the issue really just isn't within our jurisdiction and it's not within any of those agencies that we can refer them to, we let them know it is a property level issue. You need to work with your management company.
Thank you both. So now we're going to talk in a little more detail kind of about each of these processes. And I know there's lots of words, but this is, we wanted to be sure you guys had all of kind of the whole requirements, and then also give us an opportunity to let you guys ask questions and us share kind of what our thoughts and what we think might help. So for tenants and complaints, a person who has a complaint can submit that complaint to the department. And if they need help submitting that, the Housing Resource Center folks do that. And then if assistance is needed for non-English speaking persons, the person interested in filing the complaint can access the department's language assistance webpage. The department will provide the person filing the complaint and to each person who is a subject of the complaint a link to the rule, which serves as the department's policies and procedures relating to complaint investigation and resolution. So kind of like the compliance monitoring rules, the complaint rule is written kind of as a manual, even though it is the complaint rule. So we try to write all of our rules in a way that are understanding and kind of go through the process. So since we don't have like a operations manual, the monitoring rules or the complaint rules or whatever the different section of the Texas Administrative Code you're using can be used. The department will notify the complainant of the resolution of the complaint within 15 business days after the date of the complaint receipt, or we will notify the complainant within those 15 days that we need a longer time frame. So if it can be resolved within 15 days, great, we're going to do that and we're going to send out the letters. But if it cannot be resolved and there's got to be corrective action, maybe there was a physical inspection issue that was going to take longer to repair, or maybe there was actually a compliance issue that needed to have the corrective action period. We're going to let them know that. And sometimes with complaints, your corrective action period, you may have two. You may have like hey, this needs immediate attention. So you've got to fix this within, 3 days, 5 days, 10 days. But you also still have the 90-day corrective action period to correct. Sometimes there's multi-parts to a complaint. Additional complaints submitted by the same complainant describing an issue which has already been closed or had final resolution and for which there is no substantively new information presented will be considered resolved. A letter to this effect is then sent to the complainant by the department. In such cases, a new complaint will not be opened in our public complaint system. A complaint may be withdrawn by the complainant at any time, and we do have that happen sometimes where they say, oh, when I talked to you the first day, you told me to contact the management company, like Enrique said, and they contact them and it's all a big misunderstanding and it gets resolved, that day, and the complainant calls back and says, oh no, never mind, I don't need a complaint. And assuming that there's not anything concerning in the complaint that would mean that we leave it open, because we have been notified of something that we have to investigate, we would be able to close that. A complainant can request and receive from the department copies of any documentations or records collected by the department with regards to the complaint, subject to the Texas Public Information Act. So if they want a copy of the land use restriction agreement, they can do a public information request. If they want different copies of different things, they can request those just like anybody else could as well through the public information request process that's outlined on our website.
Can I just
You
add
can
that
add
it's not always a 90-day corrective action period. There are certain complaints that have a lesser, and you do not get an additional time. Reasonable accommodation complaints have a lesser time frame. VAWA complaints have a lesser time frame. Certain complaints, there is not a 90-day. It's a much lesser corrective action period.
So many complaints are easily explained with program requirements. However, tenants don't feel that they get an adequate explanation from on-site staff, or they just don't understand it and need it presented a second way, and feel they have nowhere to turn except the complaint process. So a lot of times the complaints are driven by rent increases, which could be mitigated by on-site staff being equipped to explain the process of rent changes at the initial lease signing, and then including the rent and income handout at renewal or rent increase time. That handout is in the attachments for this. If you see up at the top of your go-to platform, there's a little sheet of paper with a paper clip. That's where the handouts are. There's about 11 things in there. It would probably be worth it to download those extra things if you do not already have them. A lot of times with rent increases, transparency can help avoid these types of complaints. And I know I tell you guys this anytime I talk to you about this is, please don't tell them that TDHCA made you raise the rents. That's not what's happening. You could charge $1 for what TDHCA is concerned with. You just can't go over the max. So there needs to be, if you need to develop a script for your staff to use, or have like a point person that talks to people when there are concerns, and maybe beef up those rent increase notices or those rent change notices to really explain, that this is a program that has, income limits that change, income and rent limits that change annually, different things like that. So you might look at those kinds of things as a staff. And you can always put yourself in the tenant's shoes and think, okay, well, what if my mortgage company or my landlord just sent me a letter that said, well, your mortgage is going up or your rent is going up, however much money, with no explanation. You don't know why, you don't know what's happening, and you just get a notice kind of out of the blue, which is how a lot of these tenants feel. So I think if we put ourselves in their shoes, then that is something that we could be easily mitigated kind of from the jump without having to go through the complaint process and go through all this extra stuff. However, when they call, we pull the income and rent limits and we go through that with them and kind of explain to them, hey, here's the maximum rent. It does look like they're in compliance. If they gave you the proper 75-day notice, if it's going up $75 or more, and if your rent hasn't increased more than once in the last 12 months, then there may not be anything further we can do, but they're always welcome to open a complaint so that we can investigate fully. The other item is maintenance requests, and I'm going to let Enrique and or Manuel talk about that too, but making sure your tenants know a timeline for repairs and requests. If a part has to be ordered and the request is delayed, let them know. Communication is key when it comes to maintenance concerns. I think that's probably what spurs lots of y'all's calls, huh? Do you have anything you want to add to that, Enrique or Manuel?
I'll let Manuel start.
Oh, thank you, Enrique. Yeah, thank you, Kara. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Yeah, just communicate. Make sure you communicate to your residents. When the resident, contacts us, I'd say about 75% of the time, it is a dispute between management or a lack of communication between management and the tenant. A lot of times you have to hire a third party to make the repair. So just like Kara said, just let the tenant know what process that you're in. If they put the request for repair and it's going to take time, you have to find a third party vendor to come out and fix the AC or come out and fix the leak or come fix the elevator. That takes time. So please let your tenants know. A lot of times we're just kind of in between. We're kind of just mediating between both parties to ensure that the tenant knows that they are being listened to, being heard, and that repair is going to be taken care of. So that's pretty much it. Communication is key. Requests for repairs. they need to be responded to per Texas Property Code within 7 business days. So there's a kind of a time frame when they put that request in, and if they don't submit the request in writing, that's the first thing that we ask the tenant. Did you put the request for repair in writing? Because that starts the time frame. And the Texas Property Code says the manager, the landlord, has to make a diligent effort or prove that they're making a diligent effort. And that's a very broad term. So as long as you're communicating to your resident and doing what you can to make those repairs and letting them know that, hey, I heard you, I'm listening, and I'm going to get this taken care of, then that'll save us a lot of calls. If we can sit and talk to your tenants for 30 minutes about, whatever they want to talk about. They have a lot of things to talk to us about, and we try to really just keep it to, this is what we can assist with, this is what we cannot assist with. If we can take the time to listen to your tenants, you all should also listen to your tenants, make sure that they're being heard, and address their complaints or requests. Enrique, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I'll add something. So some of these complaints that we receive, I'll contact the complainant and ask about work orders, and they'll say something like, "Yes, I yelled at the maintenance guy as he walked around," and they think that's a maintenance request because they yelled it at the maintenance guy who was walking past and doing another maintenance project. Okay, so there's that, and there's I wanted to add that I do inspections, and I'll go into a unit and I'll see some issues and then ask the tenant, why didn't they submit a work order? And they'll say something like, well, I didn't want to make waves, I can live with this. And so you also have those tenants who repairs should be made, but they're not letting the property know. So when I do inspections now, I ask I ask the staff, do the tenants know the process for submitting a maintenance request? Because I'll also get those complainants who will say they only want maintenance requests through the portal, and I don't know how to operate a computer. And then I'll talk to property, and they'll say, no, they could call, they could come in, they could phone it in, they can come in personally. Well, for some reason, the tenant thinks there's only one way to submit a request, and they don't know how to do it. So I think Cara mentioned a newsletter, and I'm finding out that properties do some kind of periodic newsletter or information blast or something like that. And every so often, the process for a maintenance request should be part of that. That's it.
I think that's a good idea.
I actually think also, I actually recommended this to a property just recently, that, all of you have to do supportive services.
Yep.
And in those services, I am sure you could find a category that would fall in where you just have an educational night for your tenants.
Like a town hall meeting.
Like a town hall meeting. Like how does your rent work? How do you file a maintenance request? What does it look like if you use the maintenance portal and you submit something and you get a text message or an email back that says in process or submitted? Does that mean it's closed? Doesn't mean it's been to the maintenance guy. Walk through your processes with the tenants and just educate them on what's going on with the office staff. I think it would save your office staff a lot of time during their workday of people coming in just to ask questions. If they know that monthly, they're going to have access to the lead maintenance guy and the manager and ask a lot of questions and have a topic that you cover. Maintenance requests, paying your rent online. We're having a rent increase next month.
Yeah.
What is that? Why are we having this rent increase? What does it look like? Just, again, we're back at communication, but that is, have a town hall. It's so easy. Do it after work hours,
I feel like I should also advocate for your maintenance staff, since I'm married to somebody that does maintenance, and I hear these complaints from his perspective a lot. He's on the conventional side, but maintenance is maintenance is maintenance. It's the same at a tax credit deal as it is at a conventional property. The process is the same. If your office staff is promising that maintenance is going to get there that day, and then maintenance comes in and says, whoa, 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 unit 101 just had their entire plumbing system go haywire because somebody drilled a hole in it, replacing sheetrock, that's my focus. The office staff needs to call that tenant back and say, hey, I know I promised this, but we've had another emergency. I'm so sorry. I will touch base with you. A lot of it is that, that I know we keep saying communication, but like practice, if you promise something, then do it. And if you can't keep that promise, then you need to communicate that with them. I think most people are pretty understanding as long as they kind of know what's going on. The flip side of that is, I just lost my train of thought. The property where my husband works switched to an online portal. And one of the issues is that as soon as the staff pulls it from the portal, it shows closed on the tenant side. So they started getting just hundreds of calls saying, wait, this is closed, but they never came by. Wait, my toilet's still running. Wait, my, whatever needs to be done. And it's because the tenant didn't understand that just meant that we got it, that now it's closed on your end. It's no longer just floating in the ether of the internet. It's on our end. And so their office was just inundated with calls. He was stopped on property. His assistant was stopped on property. So I think there's a lot of that. Like Amy was saying, a town hall meeting is a great way to say, and at move-in, I know you guys are like very busy. I was on site for a long time. I get it. And the goal is to get people moved in, signed, paid. Here's your keys. Have a great tenancy. But I think spending a little bit of time with folks at the very beginning and saying, hey, here's how this works. Here's how our maintenance request works. Make sure you read through this policy. Make sure you know, kind of what's going on. I think all of that at the front end is a super helpful way to make sure that your tenants are fully equipped for their tenancy there. And I think they're just going to be happier in general, and just because they know what's going on. They feel like they have gotten the resources. I'll get off the maintenance soapbox now, unless there's more to add.
I mean, just in general, also, like, I think it's a good idea at move-in to walk the unit with them before anything comes in there, before they move a piece of furniture or anything. Don't just hand them the keys and say, have a good life. You probably haven't been in that unit since you turned it for make ready. Maintenance probably hasn't been in that unit since you turned it for make ready.
And they probably don't know where it is.
So you probably just need to go in there with them, make sure that air conditioning comes on, turn on the AC, turn on the stove, walk through the unit, do the move-in checklist with them,
Yep.
Sign off on it. It's just, I know it sounds like it's taking extra time, and I know on-site staffs are busy. I know they're busy. I've been on site too, but that is going to save you and your maintenance team time in the end. Like, time up front is going to save you time on the end. Time is time, and it's just going to save just that little bit of time will make a difference.
Yeah, Amy, just to add to that, I do agree 100% about the move-in inspections. Before I came to TDHCA, I was in property management as well. And one of the things I did when I did lease ups is we did a move-in, we did the lease up, and then we scheduled a time to do the move-in inspection. And I usually personally did those myself. I walked the tenant through the unit. I had the checklist. They had the checklist. They went through everything, turned everything in, plugged things in. And then I had them sign off on each individual item. They initialed each of individual item, do the lights work, do the fixtures work, do the drains work, refrigerator, etc. So that kind of saved me on the back end when they came in 2 months later or 3 months later or 6 months down the road and said, hey, this was like that when I moved in. If I had a penny for every time I heard that as a property manager, it was like that when I moved in, I'd be super rich. I wouldn't be here talking to you guys. But that was one of the main things I heard is it was like that when I moved in. So what I did is I would pull their file out and I was like, hold on 1 second. Let me look at your file. Look at the file. Oh, here's your move-in checklist. Oh, you initialed that your HVAC was working properly. So I think it was something that either negligence or something that was done, but it was working when you moved in. So they just couldn't come back and say that we didn't make the unit ready when they first moved in. So that kind of saved me a lot of time. It in the long run, I mean, you have to schedule that time in the beginning, but in the long run, it really helped out. So just want to throw that in there as well.
Thank you. No questions or comments or anything? Okay.
Nothing yet.
Well, the next kind of piece of the complaint puzzle that we hear a lot about are lease violations. People will say, I didn't know I couldn't put trash on my front porch while I was putting my shoes on to go to the dumpster, or I didn't know that my guest couldn't park without a parking permit, or I didn't know that there were quiet hours, or whatever the scenario is. I can't even think of all the different violations that I've heard from people about. You want to be sure that there is a clear policy on what's allowed and what's disallowed. Your tenant knows where to find those. And then when your tenant violates the specific policy, send them the backup that says, you know, hey, you are only allowed this many parking spots, and come to find out you have 5, or, you know, hey, you've put your trash out on your porch 4 times and it stays for more than 30 minutes, or whatever the case may be. But make sure they know what's going to cause a violation of their lease, and make sure that they know when that violation happens. And then when they come in to talk about it, I would encourage you to do your very best, stay calm, count to 10, pop yourself with a rubber band, whatever your coping mechanism is of choice. And make sure that you stay calm when they come in, because they're going to be angry in most cases. And that's what we hear a lot when they call us, is that they're angry because they didn't think they broke the blinds. They thought it was a bad set of blinds and they don't think they should be charged, or they think they should be able to park as many cars as they want to, or whatever the case may be. So make sure that you're prepared when they come in. You stay calm, take a deep breath, tell them, hey, you know, let's have a you know, a calm, cool, and collected conversation about this. Because the last piece of what we get a lot of complaints on are kind of general tenant concerns. We get a lot of the manager, the maintenance person doesn't like me, won't help me. The office isn't open when it's supposed to be open. They don't answer the phones. I can't get anybody to respond to emails. So a lot of it goes back to that communications piece. And a lot of times, I know Amy and I both get a lot of phone calls about, I just wanted a copy of my TIC. I needed to go get food stamps and I want a copy of my TIC so I can show them what my income is, or I need that because I just like to keep all my papers ready, and those sorts of things. So give these people a copy of their paperwork. There is nothing secret about it. Because of the Paperwork Reduction Act, there's now a lot of safe harbor things where different entities that calculate income can now use other group stuff. So they can take their TIC to the food stamp office, the WIC office, the school to get adjusted lunches, or to get assistance with childcare. They can use that income certification for a lot of things. And that's something that you can easily provide them. It's a page, it's a sheet of paper. They can have that first page. That's part of why we moved that designation to the first page, so that it was an all-inclusive, everything was right there, and easy to just give them that one page. If they ask for a copy of their maintenance request because they're keeping files, I think that's reasonable. I think all of these things are reasonable. Anything to add to that? Or
Again, I think just have a town hall and go over your community policies. That could be one of your town hall. You know, these are things that you could get a lease violation for. And it's not that we're being mean or we're picking on you or we're saying, but this is everyone here's community, and everyone has the right to live in peaceful enjoyment. And your neighbor might not want to sit on their patio and drink their morning coffee and smell the trash from your patio.
Yep.
So, you know, just having again, back to communication.
So the ownership and management piece of the complaint process is that when a complaint is received, the owner is then notified. So if we get it in multifamily compliance, or if Enrique gets it in physical inspections, somebody's going to reach out. If the owner needs to be involved, if it's an out of our jurisdiction thing, we don't usually reach out to the owner for anything. But the complaint team in the applicable division will review the complaint, assign it to a monitor or inspector, and then that person takes over the complaint liaison actions. The complaint liaison is going to request documentation from the owner or management. It'll get uploaded into CMTS attachment system, and you'll have usually 5 days. There are instances where that's quicker because of the nature of the complaint, like Amy was talking about. If it's a VAWA issue or a reasonable accommodation issue, it might be shorter than the 5 days, but for general complaints, it's going to be usually 5 days. And your prompt response is going to help us to resolve the complaint quickly. My last few complaints, the owner has uploaded stuff almost immediately because they have everything ready and digital, and it was easy to upload tenant files and written policies and procedures. Include a cover letter when you respond if you want to tell us essentially the property side of the situation. If you know, sometimes you don't know that the person has a complaint, so you don't know what's going on. But if it's that, no, Miss Smith turned in a work order, we called her, we told her that, we had to order a new AC, we had to schedule it, it's going to be the end of the week, we've put a window unit in, whatever the case may be. Or no, we told Miss Jones that her rent was increasing, but it's not increasing until December. She didn't understand. She thought it was going up in September because the utility allowance goes into effect. That sort of a thing. I get lots of utility allowance complaints. A lot of them I'm able to resolve without even involving you guys. But do know that my name, phone number, and email address are put on your doors when you guys post. And so that is why I say I get a lot of these phone calls, because they have saved my number. And that's perfectly fine. I agreed to that when I said I would be the contact person. But it does mean that they have a direct line to me, or to other monitors. If the owner or management group has questions, they can reach out to that complaint liaison. If you call Amy about a complaint that I'm working on, she's probably going to tell you, hey, you need to talk to Kara first, because it takes a lot to kind of research these and investigate these. And it's kind of like with a monitoring review or a physical inspection. It's easier if you start with the person that initiated the communication. And then if something happens and I'm out of the office and it's an urgent need, then somebody else could jump in. But a lot of times it's going to be better to just work with that person that's initiated the complaint communication. The complaint liaison will review the submitted documents and update the complaint system. If the submission resolves the issue, or it turns out it's not within our jurisdiction, then we are going to close it. We will update the parties involved so that everybody knows, hey, this is closed, it's resolved. If you don't receive resolution, resolution letter, you can always reach out to the monitor and say, or the physical inspector, and say, hey, did this complaint get resolved? Did I never get anything back? A lot of times on the complaints, no news is good news. Is that, I mean,
only about me, because I keep messing up, and that's it.
So, and then if the submission did not resolve the issue, or created new issues or new questions, or more documentation had to be requested, you will probably get another letter. Sometimes I email folks and say, hey, I got your submission, here's my questions about it, can you please, respond within a day or by the end of the day or something like that. If the submission shows non-compliance and now a new corrective action period is identified, sometimes there will be 2 dates. Like a very quick date, 3 or 5 days. Sometimes if an eviction notice or a notice to vacate is non-compliance, you will get like a very quick, hey, this has to be fixed right now, but you also need to fix your property policies, and that may have a 90-day corrective action period. And then if the issue requires or needs a quicker response, like reasonable accommodations, eviction notices, notices to vacate, VAWA requests, that sort of a thing, then we will shorten that corrective action period, like Amy said. Once the complaint is resolved, the resolution letter is uploaded into CMTS, and the complainant is also notified. Things that might be requested to resolve a complaint. Sometimes we need the entire tenant file. That includes the communications file. Written policies and procedures, send all of them, not just the tenant selection plan. Sometimes we want the lease and the ledger, maintenance requests, completed work orders, invoice from work completed, estimates for reasonable accommodations, which require modifications, responses to reasonable accommodation requests, property wait lists, anything else that the department needs to resolve the complaint. Is there anything else we might request? Anybody that's with us today thinking?
I just know that in the past, I'll just add this, and Nathan, you can jump in because it's been a minute since we've had to work one, but Nathan and I will have changed what we are requesting off of the immediate reasonable accommodation. So before we would get the complaint about, I made a reasonable accommodation request and they are ignoring me, or they haven't done anything, or whatever it may be. And so we would ask for the request and the response. And then we would have to review that and then go back and be like, okay, now what? And you've responded, but you're not really doing it. So now we want the response, the plan, the modification of when you're going to complete the work. What is the plan? We've added more to that letter, kind of beefed it up. So we're asking for more on the front end of, we need your response. If it's a denial, we need to know why you denied it. We need to know, all of the things that back up that denial. If you're approving it, we want to know your plan of action when you're going to work on this modification for the reasonable accommodation, and when the contractors are coming in, what's the next steps? Because we want to see that you're moving forward on that approval.
Yeah, to kind of add to that, this is Nathan. When a lot of times what we'll also see is somebody will claim that, oh, well, we denied a modification request because it was, clearly a financial and administrative burden. It is not clearly a financial and administrative burden until you have submitted, documentation that you got estimates to see how much the work would even cost. We've had people say that it was a financial burden without even looking at an estimate. And then also, just because you have an estimate doesn't mean that number is a financial burden. Show us why it's a financial burden. That is what you need to be able to show us when we get this complaint. So it's not even just estimates, it's estimates and then an explanation of why that number is a financial burden.
Yes, thank you, Nathan. But yes, we used to do that in two parts, where we would ask for the response and then ask for the others. Now we're just asking for all in the front end. So if you dealt with us in the past for a reasonable accommodation, and then now you're dealing with us for something different, and it looks a little different, that request looks a little different, it's because it was just too much time in between. So it's like we were just asking for everything in the front end.
Thank you, guys. So the property's perspective, the owner and or management group are encouraged to include a dated cover letter that outlines the property's side of the story and helps explain the issues from the property or owner or management company's perspective. This may not change if there is a citation of non-compliance, but can help the liaison understand the whole story and not only the complainant or tenant side. I like for these things to be in writing, because then I can reference things easier than a phone call. But if you want to call, I will answer the phone and talk to you. I think for Enrique's stuff, it's probably easier to have a timeline, kind of like hey, they did make a request, we did do this. If it's that direction, if it's that they didn't make a request or it got lost or hasn't been done, I think there's, definitely a reason that we would need the property's perspective. And it's kind of like I tell my kids, you might be wrong, but sometimes you have to eat a little bit of humble pie and say, hey, we messed this up and we got to fix it. Or, or the tenant has to say, hey, we misunderstood this and now we get it. And sorry for creating a commotion. But does anybody have anything they want to add to that, or what they would want to see in a property perspective letter?
Hey, Garrett, I'll touch on this topic a little bit, and then maybe Enrique can chime in a hair on this as well. Usually, if it's a health and safety deficiency, we're going to send an email pretty quickly. We'll make contact with the tenant, and then we'll get their side of the story, and then we'll ask permission from the tenant to speak on their behalf, because a lot of times some of the tenants want to remain anonymous, and we definitely don't want to get any tenants in any type of trouble with their management company. So if they request to be anonymous, then we just kind of guide them and say, hey, if the complaint is specific to your unit, then there's really not a lot we can do. We just provide them guidance on how they can navigate through the work order system, and to put the request for repair in writing, or submit a certified mail to document what their request is. If it's a common area issue, then we don't need to identify the tenant because it's a common area issue, like a pool or an elevator or the sidewalks or the playgrounds or something. Then we don't need that. We can just contact the owner without that information. But if it is specific to the unit and we talk to the tenant, and if it's a health and safety issue, then we'll send an email to the owner to kind of get resolution. And when we send that email, we need documentation, or some of us will make a phone call. What I like to do is I like to pick up the phone and I'll make a phone call and I'll talk to everyone. And then what I'll do is I'll ask them to send that to me in writing. Just basically explain to me what the process is, because a lot of times when we get involved, when I get involved, there's someone, there's a director that needs that information. I need that information to move it up the chain pretty quickly. And I'll make a phone call, I'll get that information, and then I'll ask them to put it in writing. Send me an email, just that way we can document what it is that you're doing to mitigate this issue. So if it's health and safety, we're going to need that information pretty quickly. We'll make a phone call, or we'll also, send an email to get it in writing. So if you do get a phone call or if you do get an email from us, and if it's health and safety, please respond as quickly as possible, because we're pretty much waiting to update the tenant. We're basically mediating between both parties and trying to come to a resolution. So we're talking to the tenant, we're talking to the owners, we're talking to management companies, and then sometimes a lot of times we have to update directors or sometimes the ED what's going on with this complaint. So if you do get an email or if you do get a phone call, please respond as quickly as possible. Put as much detail as possible in there, and then that way we can show that you guys on the property level are making that diligent effort. Enrique, you want to add anything?
Well, I just want to reiterate, when the complainant wants to be anonymous, if the complaint is specific to the unit, then we really can't move forward because they haven't given permission to look into a work order that they've submitted. If it's a common area and they want to be anonymous, again, there's not a specific work order to look into. So I'll just contact the property and just say someone made a complaint that there's too much trash, and just leave it at that. That's all I can do. And responses are interesting because they'll say no one has submitted a complaint about trash. And others will say, okay, well, we'll take a look. We'll walk around and see if there really is an issue. And that's it. That's all we can do. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, there are definitely times where I get a complaint that they want to remain anonymous. It's something I think the owner and management should be aware of, but there's no formal complaint. So I email and say, hey, somebody called with this. Do with it as you will, but it may result in complaints in the future if it's not resolved.
Yeah. If we do make that phone call and said, hey, there's something like Enrique said, the example of trash on the unit or the dumpsters overflowing. If we do make that contact, if we do contact you all and you say, hey, there's no complaint, there's no work order, at that point, that means send your maintenance out to investigate. Do some work to investigate that. Pick up the trash. Look for something that can be taken care of, because we're getting these phone calls for a reason. And like Kara said, it could be something potentially in the future. So if we do make that phone call, please work towards resolution.
And just to add to that, Manuel and Enrique, you can chime in here, and Nathan, because we all hear this. Once there is a complaint and your team does go out and investigate, and say you do in the process of that investigation realize, oh yes, we do have to go in here and fix this maintenance, but as you're in there fixing the maintenance, you notice something, maybe the trash on the balcony, that is a lease violation. So the maintenance man comes back and says, I fixed the AC, but I had to wade through all this trash, so there's a lease violation there. So you're going to issue the lease violation. That tenant feels that is retaliation for reaching out to us and filing the complaint. They don't feel like they would have gotten that lease violation had they not filed the complaint. So they feel like there's a retaliation portion on that. And the lease violation might be legitimate. If there's trash out there that the maintenance man had to walk through to get to fix the AC and the trash shouldn't be on the porch or whatever the scenario may be. But make sure you can back up that lease violation with, like Carol was saying, the actual part of your policies that says this is not allowed, photographic evidence that this is what was going on. Make sure that you kind of have a backup so that tenant doesn't feel like the only reason they got this lease violation was because they filed a complaint, because then they're going to turn on file another complaint saying that you're being mean to them and they got this lease violation and because of retaliation.
Yeah, and I would jump on that a little bit even further and say, let's assume that this is a reasonable modification request of some sort. So you have to have somebody go in and do some kind of physical work in the unit. I would really hesitate to give a lease violation from going into the unit and doing work for a reasonable modification. I'm not saying don't speak to the tenant, but like give them an opportunity. I mean, just like they have to have an opportunity to get documentation to prove they need the modification, give them an opportunity to get the unit to where it's, you're not going to have to give them a lease violation. Do we have any rules about that? No, that's just probably best practice to me, because that could be considered retaliation if it went to TWC.
Yeah, and they're the agency that would determine that. But so thank you, Nathan, for that's true. They would be the one, not us.
It's like I always tell my kids and my husband, read the room. If you are in there to fix something, this tenant is already upset, they've done a complaint. Maybe that's an instance where you give them a letter that just says, hey, we're not going to give you non-compliance at this or give you a violation for this because we're helping you with this. We understand you've had some other issues. We're going to give you a pass at this point. But in the future, if you have trash on your patio, I think adding salt to the wound is one of the things that exacerbates this whole process. And maybe they hadn't complained with us first, but you sent them a rent increase notice. They then turned in 14 work orders. Your maintenance guy was like, dang, that's a lot of work orders, but he came to fix them and he was cranky while he was doing it because he didn't get enough coffee in the morning, or she didn't get to have her reading time in the morning if it's somebody like me. If they go in and then the tenant perceives that, and then now all of a sudden they get a lease violation, now they're calling us saying, hey, they sent me a rent increase, I'm willing to pay it, but I want my stuff fixed. They came in, they were mean to me, now I get a lease violation. It turns into this mountain out of a molehill that could have all been just easily explained with transparency and town hall meetings. Just all of you start having town hall meetings.
And I agree with Nathan. How about we just give them a warning and not a lease violation?
Yeah. Anything else to add before we talk about resolving complaints? Did you want to talk about legislative complaints?
There are, Manuel brought up that sometimes there are shorter periods that we need documentation right away. And that's because tenants do sometimes go to their representative instead of through our complaint process. Those are called legislative complaints. So the representative will reach out to TDHCA and say, this tenant, they reach out to us through our public relations division, and the public relations division reaches out to us and says, compliance, we got this complaint. Usually it goes to our director, Wendy Quackenbush, and then she kind of will loop Manuel and I in if she needs assistance, but she handles a lot of them. But she will require documentation immediately because now we're reporting to a state representative on a physical condition or a rent increase or something like that. So there might be times that we are like, we need it now because those representatives want the answer ASAP. So sometimes those move a lot quicker a lot faster because we have higher up people that are wanting an answer
Yeah.
really, really quick.
Yeah, and if it gets to that point, we may come out and do an inspection. We don't normally inspect on complaint basis because there's roughly 3,000 properties across the state of Texas, and we have 15 inspectors. So we try not to inspect on complaint basis. But if it's in the media or if there is a legislative inquiry, like Amy said, we may come out and visit you. I mean, it's in our TAC rule that we just have to give you. Amy, I don't think you guys have a notification process to come out and visit a property for a file audit, but for inspections, we have to give at least minimum of 48-hour notice because you have to notify your residents. That's the only reason why. Otherwise, we would be out there immediately. So just FYI, if it gets to that point, we may come and pay you a visit.
Yeah, there is a couple on a regular monitoring review, we do give notification, but in our rule, it does say we don't have to give them notification. And several times I have just shown up at a property because of a complaint.
Anything else, or we can?
Yep.
All right. Oh, my mouse fell asleep. Where'd it go? All right, so now we're going to talk about some different resolution items, and still feel free to put questions in the questions box. The goal is to, be able to have this conversation with you guys and get your questions answered. So the goal of the complaint process is to resolve the issue that caused the complaint. Sometimes it's a change to policies and procedures for the ownership, management, and/or property. Sometimes it's just an explanation. Sometimes it's a fix to a tenant lease or file or rent or a reasonable accommodation. So it can vary. The department must have evidence of resolution. We would have to see evidence of the lowered rent, lease ledger, notices, etc., maintenance requests, completed work orders, invoices, updated policies and procedures, owner's certifications, that sort of a thing. The complaint liaison will communicate, oh, that's a typo, will communicate resolution and expectations to the complainant. If the required resolution was not reached or provided, the complaint will remain open. Notice to vacate being revised to compliant version that was not issued, for example. So you have to give folks a reason if you give them a notice to vacate or a non-renewal. And a lot of times that's the phone call, is that they sent me this non-renewal. It just says that, my lease is up. That is not a sufficient reason to non-renew somebody. You've got to give them, was it lease violations? Was it, failure to pay rent timely, and that's part of your requirements for renewal or whatever. I don't even know if that's a legal reason. So don't use that necessarily. You've got to give them a reason. And a lot of times that's what the complaint originates from, is that the notice was the conventional notice. A lot of you use Blue Moon forms. There is an affordable housing section on Blue Moon, as I understand it, where they've got the forms that match what we require in 10.613. So make sure you're using those if you're using those, and if you're using other notices, make sure they're compliant. Rent was increased more than once in 12 months and did not revert back to the lower rent as required, or you changed the designation and didn't put it back, or whatever the different communication. And we are also going to follow up with the tenant to say, or at least I know we do it in compliance, we say, they've told us this is how they resolved it. Is that how it was resolved? They told us they fixed this, and then the tenant's going to reach back out if it wasn't lower, if the rent wasn't fixed, or they didn't get a revised notice to vacate, they just got the same one, or they're still being asked to pay that higher rent, or whatever the case may be. So you can't just pay lip service to it. It has to actually get resolved. Any suggestions or any other comments on this part? All right, so some department suggestions. We've got a lot of tools that are available to you. The Tenant Rights and Resources Guide, I know that's required to be posted and to be given out, but it is a tool. It is something that explains kind of the whole process, and what responsibilities fall where, and how to contact folks. And then there's the income, rent, and utility allowance handout, which we do try to review periodically and make sure that's updated. your utility allowance posting is helpful because then folks know, hey, this is changing. And I know, again, that's required. And I also know when you guys are sending that out because people call us. I got several phone calls yesterday about one, and lots of that's a confusing thing for folks because they think it's money they're going to get. So make sure they understand that that's more of a calculation issue and something that's deducted to determine their rent. There are lots of trainings pertaining to reasonable accommodations, assistance animals, all those different things online. Compliance and Inspire trainings are available. Income determination trainings. I would encourage you to take all the trainings as often as you can. I know some of them have a cost to them. But we do, the ones that we do here at the department, we do try to record and put on our website so that they can be available after the fact. Or if you have staff that you're like, man, I think I want all my staff to watch this about complaints because I think it would benefit everybody to help resolve some issues. Maybe you're getting lots of complaints, you know, about communication issues or something like that. This would be a good tool to share with them. The Vacancy Clearinghouse is a great tool for folks that are looking to move or are looking, they need to go to a different area. A lot of you are, or a lot of our senior properties, there are some very savvy seniors out there, and they know how to use the internet. They know how to come to trainings. That there may be a handful of them on here. We're seeing lots of tenants attend our trainings. So the tenant population is educating themselves, which I think is great. You should always advocate for yourself. And if you're participating in a program on any facet, you are encouraged to understand how your income is calculated. What kind of inspection process does it go through? What's the monitoring process? What are my resources? Kind of how does it work? How are the cookies made? So I think that's a great thing that tenants are, you know, attending trainings, and it's making them smarter. So they know when you guys are doing something that they perceive as disallowed, whether it's actually disallowed or not, they're knowing how to reach out to us and call and get some conversations started. So like I said, if you're using Blue Moon through the apartment association, you want to be sure you're using the forms that are developed for low-income properties. If you're using forms through your property operating system, you want to make sure they comply with the TINTAC, both 10.613 and 10.802. You have to include a lawful and specific reason for termination or non-renewal. They have to be delivered under applicable rules and the lease. They have to include the TDHCA form based on HUD Form 5380, Notice of Occupancy Rights under the Violence Against Women's Act, or VAWA. They have to state how a person with a disability may request a reasonable accommodation in relation to such notice. And they have to include information on the appeals process if one is used by the development. And that is required for some home and 811 PRA program units. The Tenant Rights and Resources Guide is online. There's an English and a Spanish version. We also have an acknowledgement page. Please don't take this form and recreate it with your own header. This is one of those forms that it's got to be our form and our acknowledgement page. So make sure you're using this as it's put out. You do fill in your management company and your property owner and your property name. And then on the next page, you would put your unit amenities, common amenities, and your supportive services. And we want to make sure those are complete. The income and rent limits handout that I've referenced several times is also a place where you put your property name, management company information, property owner. And I can tell you if one of your tenants calls me with a rent question, a utility allowance question, or how their income was calculated, I develop this and I send this to them. Even if they don't open a complaint, I think this is a super helpful handout. And a lot of folks actually email me back and say, thank you so much. That answered all my questions. I understand what's going on now, and I don't need to open a complaint. So that's why when I tell you, hey, if you provide this, it might mitigate some of these other issues that are coming up. It tells them why their rents might go up. It also gives them some links to different resources. And then it talks to them about utility allowances and explains, you know, what goes into a utility allowance, what doesn't, when the change happens, how does it affect their rent, and then a couple of the different rules about the rent increases and changes. The utility allowance posting, this is what it looks like. If you use PHA, you're not going to know anything about this. But if you use any of the other 4 methodologies under the department review, you're going to use that. And remember, I said it's got my name, phone number, and email address on there. That is why your folks call me. We develop very quick friendships. And a lot of times, like Enrique said, or Manuel said, they just want to be heard. They just want somebody to talk to. And I'm okay with that. I can let 30 minutes go to just listen to somebody. But kind of like they said, you guys can too. And listening to them is sometimes the biggest help, because then they get it off their chest. I know for me, a lot of times if I can talk through a concern I'm having or a problem, sometimes when I talk through it, I realize, oh, it's not that big of a deal, or oh, here's the resolution, kind of a deal. The different trainings are available on our website. You can find those on that toolkit, sample forms and downloads website, or on our YouTube page. And then we've got lots of other trainings on our presentations page. And this is updated regularly to help owners, management companies, on-site staff, new people, help anybody explain anything. And so I think this is a good resource that we've put out there and started making, pretty readily available to folks. We have our income determination trainings. So if you were with us on the 3rd, the one we did a couple weeks ago, that one is available on the website now as well. This is what the vacancy clearinghouse looks like. They can put in city, county, zip code. They can say they want elderly only, they want Section 811, or any of those other items. They click search and it pulls up everything in that area. So this is, a great thing for your tenants to know about, because, and if you are full and have a wait list, this is a great thing to tell people, because, they can look in your zip code or in your area if they want to stay there while they're on your wait list, or if they decide they don't want to get on the wait list. This is a great tool for them to still be able to find affordable housing in their area. That's all I have. We still have about 20 minutes before we have to shift gears. So if anybody else, staff, that has anything to add, have at it. Or if I forgot anything or misspoke.
Oh.
I was just going to say, Nathan, I feel like you are the one who always has this information. It might be Jeremy, but complaints have continued to increase at TDHCA, which kind of echoes what Carol was just saying about tenants are very educated, which is great. You should be educated about a program that you live in, but they do continue to increase, and the majority of them have to center around communication. But I think, Nathan, you know the actual numbers.
Yeah. Specifically, which kind of complaints did you want to know
just,
about?
I guess in general,
How many do we have so far in 2025? Do you know that?
Almost
1,780 something.
Yeah,
Oh,
Right, and that's total that's total complaints submitted to the agency. We do get a lot of complaints from people who are not living in properties or dealing with programs that we have jurisdiction over. So yes, we're on pace this year through the calendar year to get more complaints in the complaint system than we did the previous year, which was about 2,400 or so. But only a fraction of that are complaints that TDHCA actually has jurisdiction over. If I'm not mistaken, last year it was around just over 800 or so that we actually had jurisdiction over, and we're on pace to, probably have well more than that for this calendar year that are under our jurisdiction that we, may actually be able to assist with. So the number of complaints continues to just elevate, and it has over the last about 5 years. And so I think it's just, everyone should be aware, obviously, with, the pandemic and everything like that, people became very aware that the government is available to help them and assist them in some way. Whether their issue can actually be, assisted and corrected by our agency or some other government agency, but they are aware. Because of course, over the last 5 years, the government has been much more in the forefront of assisting people than it has in the past. The uptick from even 2019 or 2020 to 2021 in terms of complaints received is exponential. So Yes, the individual complainants and, you know, tenants are very aware that if they're having an issue, there is someone out there that can assist them, more so than in the past. So.
Yeah, to kind of put some numbers on that, since this is a compliance training, we had in 2024 about 600 complaints that were compliance related only. And by just July of this year, we were already over 400. So yeah, it's a lot. And that's just, like I said, that's just from a compliance standpoint. So, you know, monitoring physical inspections and reasonable accommodations for housing stuff.
I will say that those are only the complaints that are called to through HRC that are documented. A lot of us individual inspectors, I know Amy's group, we get phone calls. We just get phone calls. We try to send them through HRC, but a lot of times, you know, we just kind of try to work through them. So those are not including, those numbers are only including the ones that are documented through our Housing Resource Center. We get
Correct.
tons of calls. A lot of times we get repeat complainants. Once they have our telephone number, once they have our contact information, our email address, they're going to pick up the phone. They're going to send us an email. We do have a lot of repeat complainants. One thing I also do want to mention for property managers and regional managers is I don't want to say customer service, but be considerate. Have some sort of consideration for your residents. I can't tell you how many times, I'd say probably 75% of the theme of the complaints is management doesn't listen. They're rude, they're disrespectful, or they just don't listen to what we're saying. You know, courtesy and politeness goes a long way. Please just listen to your residents. Most of those complaints stem from someone getting frustrated or they feel that management doesn't listen to them, doesn't hear them. Again, this goes back to communication. A lot of times we have those types of complaints where they're just frustrated. They're just mad that someone is not listening. Please be considerate with your residents. Please be polite, especially with your seniors. You know, it's just anybody in general. You know, we here, like Nathan said, we are the government, and you know, we try to assist as much as we can, and that's what we're here for. That's our job. We're here to assist our most vulnerable Texans, and that's what we're going to do. We do listen to what they have to say, but please, at your level, you guys can stop it. The buck stops at your desk, and then it comes to us. But you guys can resolve that by just a little bit of consideration for your residents. Be a little bit polite, you know, be civil, you know, talk with your residents. And like Kara said, a lot of times I'll pick up the phone, I'll have a complainant, and I'm listening. I'm just listening for 30 minutes. I'm just guiding the conversation. I'm steering the conversation, letting them know what I can and cannot assist with. And a lot of times they talk themselves into resolution, and they understand that, hey, it's really not that big of a deal. It may not be that big of a deal. And there's probably a small part of that complaint that we can address. The first thing that we do when we get a physical inspection request or something with maintenance is, you know, the first thing we ask is, did you put it in writing? You need to follow your lease. If they don't follow the lease, we ask that they contact the manager, put it in writing, and then give us a call back if you don't hear something from management within 7 to 10 business days. And I'd say 85% of the time, they don't call us back because they follow the process. They submit the request for repair, and management takes care of it. So I just want to add that in there. Consideration, polite. Get more flies with sugar than you do with vinegar.
We did get a question, and I'm gonna kind of kick it to Nathan and Jeremy. They want to know how they sign up for the vacancy clearinghouse, and I understand that everybody got funded through us in the vacancy clearinghouse, correct?
Correct. They should be in there. Some of the, you know, unless a property is currently under construction and not actually placed in service, those will not be in there. But if you are leasing units to tenants and you have received funding from TDHCA in some way, your property should be in this system. If it is not, that means your property is not in our CMTS database. And if you're not in our CMTS database, you're not receiving funding from TDHCA. But if, you know, somebody is looking for a apartment, This is where they can go and see ones that are available in their area. You can see the number of affordable units at each property. That feature has had some issues recently, and it's being worked on by IS. But if you don't see a property on the vacancy clearinghouse, it is not funded by TDHCA, or it is currently under construction and not yet appearing. But it should appear if it is received money from our agency.
And one of the concerns I get when I direct people to this is they'll say, we'll use the Heights on Palmer. They'll say, well, I called them because that vacancy clearinghouse said they had 57 vacant units. And I called them and they said they're on a wait list for all sizes. Well, either one, our system is broken, or two, CMTS is not updated. And so this is why it's super important to keep CMTS updated. And I do tell folks, hey, you know, maybe they update it once a quarter or once a month, or it's tied to their operating system or something. But if you're telling people that you have a wait list, but the system they can find through us, which is supposed to be pretty reliable, is showing that you have a ton of vacant units, that creates a situation where they're probably also going to call us and say, hey, your website says that they have a bunch of vacant units. They're telling me they're on a wait list. So you want to be sure that kind of, you know, all of your pieces of the puzzle fit together and give the same information.
And if it's a question of where to find this, of course, like Cara said, our search feature works really well on our website. You can type in vacancy clearinghouse, you'll find the link. Or on every page on our website now, there is a link to the Help for Texans page. And it appears on the front page. And then if you're on any other page, it appears. And the vacancy clearinghouse is in the first box in types of assistance, right at the top, first link. That you can click and open and search by those. I know that there, you know, like with anything, it has its limitations. You know, you want to make sure if you're searching, you're only searching for individual and family and elderly properties. If you select all of the options, you know, there are some issues with it and it might not return you any results. So you want to make sure you're only selecting options for properties you either if you're a management company of property, you want to see what the vacancy clearinghouse is showing, making sure you're only selecting the type of property. If it's just a general individual and family property, or if you do have elderly limitations, that you're selecting that, you know, but not any of the other options that are on that as well. Because there are, you know, if you select disaster or transitional, most likely you will not get any results currently. But if you select all of them together, you might also not get any results, just because it might not return, it might be trying to return results for something that isn't there. So just a reminder on that, on using the vacancy clearinghouse. That could be a reason why you might be not getting a result if you are searching and selecting all the options versus just selecting elderly only and individual and family.
Anything else anybody wants to add?
Yeah, since we're on the website, we did talk a little bit about written policies and procedures and how we might request those if a complaint is filed. If you are concerned about whether or not your written policies and procedures are compliant with our rules, we have some new tools that can help. And it's right there at the very top of our website right now, but it's under our fair housing section. And there is a checklist that's linked in here that will help you go through our rules and make sure that your written policies and procedures comply with our rules. It's not going to get everything, but it catches most of the major errors that we see. So that is something that you might want to check out. There's also one for affirmative marketing. We didn't talk about that, but that is also available as well.
Oh, that's what happens when I click the link, Nathan. Wah, wah.
Okay, well, if you need to find it, why is that not right? I'll have to talk to Christina about that. But if you go to, you can also go to the fair housing page that on our website.
No P in housing.
No, not as far as I know. Um, and from there, you can click on, there's a link a little bit further down. There we go. Fair housing resources.
Toolkits.
Yep. Fair housing forms and tools is where it's at.
I just used this recently. That's why it's purple.
Mhm.
And it's very intuitive. I mean, it definitely walks you through step by step. So yeah, it worked really well when I tested it out the other day. So yeah, very handy.
Nice job, Nathan and Jeremy.
Well, thank you.
Enrique, did you have something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, if you go to the complaint, filing a complaint. I actually wanted to circle back about visiting properties based on complaints. And I think it's because our TDHCA website talks about, if you think there's fraud, waste, and abuse at our property, that we get these complaints they sound like whistleblowers. They talk about how bad the property is. The staff is terrible. There's no maintenance. You've got to come out here and investigate. And we just don't do that, based on most complaints. Okay, so but as Manuel said, it is rare that we do come down and visit a property. Okay, so that was one thing. Another thing had to do with amenities. We didn't talk about it. I wanted to bring that up real quick. So when we monitor a property, when we inspect a property, we do look at amenities, and amenities need to work. But what we don't monitor is the availability of amenities. So the swimming pool, if there's a season in which you offer the swimming pool, that is a property level decision. If the fitness room is only available during business hours, that is a property level decision. And all that information needs to be communicated with your tenants. Okay. Now I want to circle back to amenities have to work. Some properties, okay, so we monitor the amenities based on the LURA. And some properties have more amenities than the required threshold. But over time, some of these properties decide they can't maintain all those amenities. So they take down the basketball goal because well, it keeps getting ruined. And so now they're no longer going to provide it. But according to the LURA, they don't have to provide it because they have more amenities than what is required. We still get these complaints because when they moved in and when they were shown around the property, they were told all these things were available. And when one of those things is no longer available, they think they've been wronged, and now they complain to us. So somehow, that's not something that we look into, because you do have your required threshold amenities. Again, you can, try to communicate that with your tenants. All right, those are the two things I have.
All right, so it is 10:27 right now. I'm gonna end the recording unless there are any questions. I didn't see any pop up. I thank you all for joining us. If you can give me just a minute, I'm gonna turn my camera and mic off and switch gears to the open forum. Any staff that's with us right now is welcome to stay on, and we answer general questions. A lot of times questions about the webinar topic continue to come in. So we would love it if you stayed with us, Jeremy and Nathan and Dawn. But if you have other stuff to do, we thank you for joining us this morning, and we look forward to having you join us again in the future.